Hi there, the name's Max, also known as Karen, and welcome to a bonus episode of my writing advice and inspiration podcast, Omakase. As you know, my show is brought to you thanks to my patrons. The people supporting me over at patreon.com/mkaren get a bunch of cool perks every month. One of them, though, is that they get to vote on the bonus video for the month. And this here, today's topic, from story idea to finished novel, is brought to you thanks to them. At the end of this show, I'm going to give every single one of my patrons, as of the recording of this video, a shout out. But before I advance into the topic of this podcast/video, if you're interested, there is a new poll on my Patreon page. If you pledge as little as $1, you get to vote on that poll and watch an all-new video a whole month before it goes live on YouTube and on iTunes and Spotify and so forth. Okay? Now, with all that preamble out of the way, let's begin the show improper. From story idea to finished novel. An overview, a primer on self-publishing and creating a finished book. And I feel it is very important to begin by clarifying that this is aimed mostly towards independent publishing. Steps 1 through 4 is still applied to traditional publishing, but steps 5 and 6 are all about independent publishing. I am not going to tell you which is best and which is the best for you. I think there are perks, hardships, and bonuses to both of them. I prefer independent publishing for my own particular reasons. I am a very do-it-yourself kind of person, so I have looked through the entire process and I have released several books, so I am very confident with giving you this overview guide of step by step what I do when I wish to create a novel. Now, I've said this in my writing advice videos and I've been saying it forever, but creating a book is a long process, and you will see I'm not hiding you any information. I have this checklist here that is a nice, clean version of my own checklist that I go through when I create a novel, and I know it is going to be a little daunting, especially because a lot of writers don't realize just how long it takes to make a book. But I don't want this guide here to discourage you. Instead, I want it to be a reminder that writing a book is a journey, and it takes a while. So don't be discouraged. Keep on moving, keep on walking, don't give up. Because, as with journeys, as with building bridges, as with anything that you work on a piece at a time, as long as you keep at it, you will make it there. You can build houses, build bridges, and tell stories. So again, as I mentioned, this guide is aimed more towards independent publishing. But of course, there are things here that will help you if you want to send your book to an agent and in turn have that agent sell your book to a publishing house. There are things here and steps here that will help you, especially if you're completely new to the entire process. Now, the differences between traditional and independent publishing are not the focus of this video, but I'm just going to give you a quick, really quick overlook, just in the case that you have no idea what I'm talking about. Traditional publishing is the traditional way in which authors have had their works published in the past. You reach out to an agent, and that agent in turn sells your novel to a publishing house. Writers do not directly contact publishing houses. That's just not how it works. That's a traditional way. It takes a long while, and it's more complicated than it may seem. Just because it's just a two-step process that I'm summarizing for you does not mean it is a two-step process. It takes a long while, and it is very intricate. Independent publishing is one where the author either A, hires people, or takes care of the work on their own. Sending books to online storefronts, ordering physical copies, or putting their book on places that can print books on demand. This guide and primer will be focused primarily on independent publishing, which is what I do. It's what I know the best. And like I said, this guide here, although summarized and cleaner than my regular steps, is still really close to what I actually use on my own. So, with that preamble out of the way, all the housekeeping is in order, let us begin with the very first step. The one that I think, if you're clicking on this video, you're the most familiar with. The idea for a novel. Now, if you have been following my content for a long time, you know that I have a 1-hour workshop for how to plan your novel from the ground up. That is the title of the video, How to Plan Your Novel from the Ground Up. It's on YouTube. I recommend you checking it out. It's got my best advice. I made it a couple years back, but it's a 1-hour workshop. I walk you through the whole process. I don't want to have most of this video be all about how to come up with a story idea, because as you will notice, coming up with the idea for your story, it's like part 1 of step 1. There is a long journey ahead of us. So I'll just say this. Once you have a story idea, a cool concept, a cool world, a person you want to follow and you want to tell their story, it is at this point, once I have the idea not solidified, I have never been the sort of person to fill entire binders worth of world building and background information. I am not that sort of person, mostly because I have learned in the dozen or so books that I've written that stories change as we write them. I think it is better to remain flexible, to have an idea, to think what you maybe hope will happen in the story on your mind, and to just jump in. But now, before I jump into the actual writing, into the act of writing, once I have my story idea, I take a moment to research everything that I think is going to be relevant to the story. Let me say this one more time. I research everything that I think might be relevant to the story, and nothing else. You can always do more research later, and you will have to for revision, but honestly, my recommendation for the very first step is just to get yourself writing as soon as possible. Which is the next step. Once you have that story idea, once you have researched, to give yourself answers to the questions you think may come up, especially if you're writing something along the lines of historical fiction, or you're writing science fiction and you want to know one particular detail about something. That's why your research is important, so you have those answers with you, so that you can go into the story aware of what may come up. It might not. You may never reference just how cold the dark side of the moon is. But in the case that you think this story is there, you know. But as I said, you want to expedite your road to start writing, because that's the next step. Once you have the story idea, once you know what you want this book to be about, the person we're going to be following, the protagonist, the obstacles along their way, you sit down, you sit your butt on the chair and you start writing. Let me say this one more time. Louder for those in the back. You sit your butt on the chair and you write. This might feel like the hardest part of the process. And that's because it is. Writing a novel, especially if it is your first novel, is the hardest part. Especially if you're not at all used to telling stories. You're not used to taking the images that you see in your mind and transcribing them on the page. To take the words of characters who you have never met up until that moment and give them form with words on the computer screen. It's hard, and it takes a long while. But like I said, if you take at it, if you work at it, little by little, day by day, you will finish that novel. Let me say that one more time. If you work at your novel every day, you will finish that novel. You will finish that novel. This is not a matter of if or maybes. You will. If you put brick by brick, you will build that bridge. You will build that house. If you take step by step, you will make that journey. It may not end where you think it was going to end up, but it will lead you somewhere. Nothing finishes books like consistency. Consistency, consistency, consistency. I say this all the time, and no one believes me. But if you wrote a page every single night, by the end of the year, you would have a novel finished. And just think how many novels you would have finished by now had you been writing 1 page a night. And the funniest thing that I sometimes get when I make that comment, sometimes people say, oh, but a page a night is too slow. Well, buddy, if you write 2 pages a night, you can write 2 books a year. Isn't that crazy? But there you go. You have the idea, you sit down, you write. It is more than likely that most of you who are listening to this podcast right now are in the trenches right now, writing, working through the story, and the highs that feel so good, and the lows that feel so bad. It's okay. But that right there is the end of this part of the process. Once the book is finished, and yes, we're still on step 1 of making that book a reality, because writing it is just the beginning. It's the hardest part. I think it's the hardest part, no question about it. The rest of this becomes a lot more mechanical, especially steps 4 through 6 are a lot more mechanical. So trust me. Right now, the beginning, you're eating the veggies right now. It's the hardest part. But right there is not the end of the first step. I have my idea for a story. I write it. And then, once I have the first draft complete, I let the book sit. Sometimes it's weeks, sometimes it's months. The book I'm editing right now, I wrote about 5 months ago. You let a book sit. You put it on cooldown to give yourself distance from the words that you wrote. It is hard for writers, and you think right now that you will never do this, but you will. Because we humans are very silly creatures. If you jump immediately into revising your work, you will show your attachment to the words you wrote. You need distance. You need time to be able to look at your writing and say, this whole page here, I put a lot of work in there. It took me days to write it. And I have to cut it. It has to leave. It's not effective and it's not pushing the story forward. In order to make the hard cuts, the hard edits, you need time. A couple of weeks, months. I recommend to spend this cool down period writing something else. I like to do it this way so I always have a book that's waiting to be revised. But that is me. This here is the first step. I call it the alpha stage, but really the names are just there because they sound cool. You get the idea, you write the book, you let it sit. That is the alpha stage. Part 1 of 6. And I know, I don't want you to feel discouraged. I'm showing you the reality of the work you're going to have to do, especially if you want to publish independently, which I know, it's going to seem like a lot of work, but I actually prefer it. It's my preferred method of publishing for many reasons, but those I might touch at the end. For now, let's move over to stage 2, the beta stage. This, once the book has been sitting for a long while and I have forgotten about it, I pick it up and I begin the revision. It is through revision that our work takes true form. I say this, and I want you to believe me. Your book will not be the same when you're finished revising it. It will be starkly different. It will feel finished. It will feel refined. You will look at the original draft and see it as a diamond in the rough. And our work now in revision is to polish, to cut it, and to polish it into perfection. I have said this in the past, and I will say it again. My goal in writing is to write recklessly, to get that book finished, and to revise mercilessly, to turn that story into the perfect diamond it is meant to be. We do not do things half-heartedly here. You're here because you love stories. You're here because telling stories is a part of you and a part of human history. It has been through storytelling that we have changed the world, created and changed culture through stories. It is inherent to the way that we grow, a part of how we change. Do not take revision lightly. My steps for tackling revision are as follows. I like to read through the book to make changes in passes. If you try to get everything done in one go, you are going to fail. Revision is a long process. You don't take a diamond in the rough and polish it. You first must cut it. You first must refine it. In the first pass that I ever do, the first thing that I ever do is that I check for typos. I write very fast. And I do not have spell check because I like to write my books real fast. I fix typos and then I do a read fixing the writing. Every time I read through the novel and I make changes, my goal is to make it better. My goal is to incrementally, gradually improve the writing. My first pass, it's just the basics. I want it to, by the end of that pass, for the story to exist in a way that you can read it and it kind of makes sense. It doesn't have to be good. It will not be good. But it makes sense. That's the goal with the first revision pass. Once that first pass is completed, I spent several other passes going into them with a goal in mind. Once I have a draft of the story that is actually readable, I refine what I'm saying. I analyze what the narration says, what my descriptions are saying, and what the characters are saying to one another. You have to question what your story is saying to make sure that you don't have just words that are just saying things for the sake of having words on the page. This is a matter of flow and having effective writing, whether it is description, narration, or dialogue. You look at it and you question what you're saying. Which reminds me, along these passes of revision, looking at your entire novel with a goal in mind, it is then that I begin doing what I do best: questioning the world. I know that this might be hard for people who are new at this, and of course it is. You're not familiar with this. But when it comes to revision, you must question your world, your characters, and the events that happen. Convenient things should never happen to your characters for no reason. You are free to let things be as inconvenient as they want for free. Bad things can happen with no reason. Good things should never happen for no reason. Your characters should fight for every single inch they gain. Not only that, but also question the world, especially if you have a fantasy or science fiction setting. You have to ask the hard questions. You have to look at this writing, at this story, as though it is a book, a movie, a game that someone else made. And look at it and ask, does this make sense? Why did this happen here and not then? And as you do this, as you question the writing, you make changes, you make notes, and you reinforce your writing. This, ultimately, questioning your writing is about making it stronger, about making the events that happen make sense. To have no freebies, and to have everything be justified and foreshadowed. This is where your story starts to take place. This is where you inject the things that matter. Where the story takes form. Gradual. Little by little, the story changes. You reinforce it. And I'll just drop this right now, because I want you to keep in mind, when you revise a story, check, question if you described everything. I can assure you, you've probably forgot to describe something. I am infamous for forgetting to describe everything. I am having so much fun writing. I am so immersed in the act of writing that I just forget to describe people and places. That just happens. But that's why, when I'm in this part of the process, I ask myself, did I describe the location? Did I describe people the instant they were introduced? Was I clear? If I was a reader, would this make sense? You have to put yourself in other people's shoes. You have to imagine what your worst critic would say. You have to imagine what me, as a giant nerd and consistency nerd, would be reading your story and questioning, well, why did this character use this ability here and not use this ability back then when it would have been really, really, really convenient for them to do so? Where the problem of the story would have been solved then had they done that. Why didn't they do that? You have to question your story, because that's how the story makes sense. That's where the good writing happens. Good writing is not something you put in the first draft. Good writing is something you revise. You make it make sense from chapter 1 to the end. It is along this part of the process where I'm doing the big overarching passes. I am looking at my story as a whole, and I am asking, what is my story's theme? What am I trying to say? What is the overall message that my story is putting forward? And once I am decided, once I can etch that on stone, I go back through the story and I make sure that theme echoes through every single beat. That's where the good writing happens. See, the thing is that when writing is being really good, you don't feel it. And the point right now is to make it feel effortless. To make it feel as though the story was always this way. Except it wasn't. It's that part of sleight of hand. We are more magicians than we are technicians. We're not creating a device. We're doing an act, a sleight of hand. Illusionism, tricking people, helping them imagine things they would have never seen otherwise, and never question the world, because we questioned it. And we provided answers, and we patched over the plot holes, and we made it feel right. That right there is the hard work. That right there is where you get your nose to the grindstone. That right there is where you have to get real about your story and give it form. That's what you need time. You have to look at it objectively, and you have to look at it critically. You can't just let things slide. You can't just say, well, that happened because it happened, and I'm not going to talk about it, and I'm not going to question it. No. You do your story a disservice. You're not honoring the story idea that found you when you just let it be as it is. But I can go on, because you know me. I love revision. It is something that I can talk for hours about, but now, let's move forward. As you're doing these passes, reading the whole manuscript and making changes, gradual changes are important. This is also why I recommend reading your story differently. Reading it on different devices, changing the font, reading it out loud, using text to speech, all to never get used to the writing. Never get comfortable. Never start just reading it without analyzing or thinking about it critically. Never just memorize your story. Look at it and actually think about it. But now, I have to move on because I've been here for a little while. It is around this part of the process that I actually think about the title for the story. This is the checkpoint in which you can actually seriously consider what you want the story's title to be. Everyone gets really worried about it. Everyone thinks that they must have it before page 1, and surprise, surprise, you actually don't need to care about it until right now. And even right now, it's not final. You need to think about the title for your story because you're about to send it to people. You're about to reach out to people you know, to writerly friends, to people you trust for feedback. This is called the beta stage because I create a beta draft, a semi-finalized draft of the story, the best, most polished version of the story I could create. And now it is time to let someone see it. People I trust, people whose opinions I respect. And I send it to them. Either in digital formats, or I actually go to the print shop and I print them out. You reach out to people, you give them notes, you give them questions you want them to answer, because remember, you're reaching out to people to see if you missed anything, to see if there's anything that you got wrong, and to see what needs improvement. You should talk to your betas, you should talk to your beta readers and ask them questions and guide into what kind of feedback you're looking for. Ask them. Communication is key to all relationships. Just talk. Tell her the truth. You know the drill. You know. So just tell people. It is at this point, once I have sent them out, right at the point when I realize that people are going to read it, that I suddenly lose all confidence in the story. This happens every time. It's always when I'm sitting there at Staples, printing out the manuscript, that I realize people are going to read this. But it doesn't matter. The story is as best as I could make it, and people are going to read it, and that is part of the process. I send it out to my betas. I give them deadlines. I give them a range of when I would like to get the book back by. And then we wait. This is stage 2 out of 6. Stage 3 is kind of a stage that happens, it can happen in between parts. You can actually work at it while you're revising, or you can actually wait until you've gotten feedback back from your beta readers. Stage 3 is the cover stage. This stage is not particularly grounded in a particular point in the timeline. Again, it's something you can just work on when you have the time. If you are going to go for traditional publishing, you need not worry about the cover of your book. The publishing house will make the choice for you. And I guess it should also go without saying that the publishing house will also choose the title of your story for you. If they like the one you have, if they think they can sell it with that title, they will keep it. They will most likely change it. That's just the way the business is. But if you are going to go for independent publishing, then it is now when you have to start thinking about the cover for your story. Why not earlier? Why not start thinking about the story when you're writing it? Well, because now, once you have revised the book and sent it, you have a really good idea of what your story is about. You have a really good idea of what should maybe be on that cover. And I need to say this right now. If you have no experience doing graphic design, I'm not saying you should not make the cover for your book. What I'm saying is that you should do research. You should go to a bookshop and look at covers of books in the same genre as you. Research is pivotal. And also, you have to learn. If you want to make the cover for your own book, you cannot make a half-hearted attempt. You can't just look for quick fixes, look for template covers, and look for template images. You have to actually put in the time and effort. And if you don't know how to make a cover, that's when research comes in. If you have no idea what you need to do, what's best, what's worse, there are courses online. There are guides on YouTube. There are things you can look into. There are things you can learn about graphic design from the internet for free. But you have to actually try, and you can't just look at one source or two. If you are interested in making your own cover, you have to do the work. Of course, you can also reach out to artists. You can also hire someone to make the cover for you. This is the thing in which you're going to have to do research no matter what, and to provide a clear guideline to the person you're hiring to make the art for you. Communication, key, relationships, etc., etc. There's, again, a whole video's worth of stuff I could talk about here, but I'm going to just tell you one thing really quickly. Make the cover file as huge as possible, because you are going to be shrinking it in different images that you're going to be using for the following parts of the project. Is start big instead of starting small. That's just a technical thing that I'm sliding in there in case no one has ever told you that. The other thing is less is always more. I know you want to have that very intricate cover with a very intricate piece of art, but I'm going to remind you right now that on most online storefronts, your book's cover is going to be reduced to that of the size of a stamp. Less is more. A clear, readable cover is better. And please, for the love of all things holy and sacred, do not use yellow text on a red background, please. For me. I went to college for graphic design, and there are countless things I can tell you. I almost just want to slide in that you should not have more than 2 different fonts on the cover of your novel. But there's more things I can say, and that's honestly neither here nor there. Do research, look up what works, and honestly, if you take one thing from this segment, go to a bookshop and look at the books in the same genre as yours. See how they did it. See what works, see what doesn't. Take pictures, take notes. That's research. You have to do that. No shortcuts, no easy ways out. Why? Because you have spent so much time. You have written this novel. You have given it shape. You have sent it out to people. Take your time making that cover be amazing. The title and the cover are the face of your novel. First impressions are very important. Make it a good one. And now, the cover, you have reached out to someone, you have made it yourself, you have hopefully reached out to people for their thoughts on it. Reaching out for advice on your cover is way easier than a novel because people just have to look at the image on their phone. You can just text to your friends. What do you think of this cover? Do you like it? Does it jump out at you? And done. Let's move over to stage 4. I call it the Ultima stage because I'm a huge nerd, but the finalized stage, it's not the final stage because there's still 2 more stages, but I call it the Ultima. And here is when, hopefully by now, you have received the feedback from your beta readers. You have gotten all the packages back, and you are looking through them. You're looking through their notes, their overall notes, their answers to the questions that you gave them. And now you're applying their feedback. You need not take all of their feedback and apply it to your novel, but you should consider all of them. You should most definitely consider what they're telling you, and never, ever, ever allow the lazy bug to keep you from making your story the best it can be. You reached out to these people for their thoughts, and you should take their thoughts very seriously. As you're making the changes, I usually like to do a couple more passes reviewing the book, reading it out loud in front of a mirror, imagining myself on the stage, reading it to a crowd, imagining their reactions, imagining my own thoughts. I want to feel as though I can read my work proudly, boldly before a crowd of strangers, and not find myself self-editing, and not find myself self-doubting my own work that I have spent so much time editing. The best time to edit is not when you're sitting on a stage before a crowd, is when you are sitting down at your chair, about to finish the book. I do the last few passes. I leave no stone unturned. I make sure that everything makes sense. I make sure everything is in its right place. And it is now when the book and its text are finalized. I will not touch that story anymore. And a part of you, this is why we try so hard, because you're gonna not touch the story ever again. Treat it like you would a relationship. Treat it like you would seeing your friends for the last time at graduation. Make it a really good experience. Take the feedback, improve on the story, make it the best it can be, and then let it go. It's over. You finalize the cover if you are going independent, but if you're not, it is now at this point that if you want to go traditional, you sell it. Some other writers might argue that they sell the story way earlier. The people that I know who have been very successful with traditional publishing sell it at this point. Once they have a really, really good draft, a really, really, really good draft, they send it. But in the case of me, an independent author, a very do-it-yourself kind of person, the book is over. I will not make any more changes to it. Is it scary? Yeah. It's really freaking scary. But it's part of the process. And just like that, once the text has been finalized, stage 4 is complete. This stage is all just about fixing that text, giving yourself time, pausing, putting the story in a drawer for weeks at a time and picking it up and reading it again. All with the goal in mind of making it the best possible. And once that's over, we move over to stage 5, the publishing phase. The part of this video that might get really long, but I'm going to try to be as brief as possible, okay? Because you have made this book, and now it's time to sell it. It's time to actually make it something people can purchase. And I assume that if you're watching this video, you are interested in selling your book as an ebook and a printed physical novel. I would urge you to do both, or if you can only do one, do ebooks, because it's just way more flexible. It just seems silly to me that writers only want to do print when ebooks are not that much work, and also it's just an outlet for people. I say that as someone who I don't buy physical books anymore because I just don't have the shelf space. I just don't have the space in my house for more books, and I just love being able to read on my phone. But that right there is a conversation for another time. If you want to sell your book as an ebook and as a printed physical novel, as an independent author, here are the steps that I take. Let's begin first with the ebook. The first thing you're going to want to do is to turn your book into an ebook. Now, you can hire someone to do it. I do that sort of services. What I recommend is that you actually learn how to do it. I learned how to code ebooks from Guido Henkel's fantastic book, The Zen of Ebook Formatting. Once again, it is Guido, Guido-Henkel, Guido Henkel, Zen of Ebook Formatting. His book walks you through the entire process, and it's just amazing. I like to reread that book whenever I'm publishing a new novel to remind myself of the steps. I am not a very technical person. I'm a writer, for crying out loud, but I learned how to code ebooks by following his guide. I have coded all of my ebooks by myself. I didn't use any programs. I didn't use any tools online. I made them all from scratch by just doing HTML formatting. It's very simple. I learned how to do it, and you can do it as well. The one thing I just want to say right now, I want to inspire you to never just plop your text into a tool and turn it into an ebook. Do not do that. there is a minefield of things that will go wrong. And trust me, I've been there. But I want to remind you, you have been working with this book for a long time. You wrote it, you revised it again. Do not just plop it into a program on some web page. Give it some love. Make it good. It's not a lot of work, I can assure you of this. Guido's book, The Zen of Ebook Formatting, walks you through it. It's fantastic. A non-technical person. I am an art person. I went to college for graphic design. I learned how to code ebooks from this book. But the process of making an ebook is, I'm going to go through it really quickly just so you have an idea of what you're going to be doing. You're going to clean the text for your novel. You're going to have nice, clean, completely devoid of any formatting. No bolts, no italics. You just want clean text that you can plop into a text file. Ebooks are actually coded like HTML, like web pages that you are looking at the internet. And thus, formatting them is really just a matter of CSS editing and making different formats for how the text is displayed. I know it sounds very technical, but I can assure you it is not. You get clean text. You format yourself the way you want your ebook to look by establishing pages, by establishing how the text is displayed, with what kind of font, with what kind of font size, and then you take all of your text and you put it into this format. I recommend saving your clean format for what your novels look like as their own individual file, because now you have yourself a template for creating ebooks later. You don't have to code an ebook from scratch every time. My books, the ones I'm publishing right now, have the same, basic template from my very first novels that I've just been improving on over time. You clean the text of your novel, you plop it into the format, you export images in a compressed format so that the file takes the least space possible, and then you export tests. I own a Kindle, I have an iPhone, I have a Nook, I have a couple Android-based e-readers, and I send my files to all of them. I see how the book looks and reads on every single one of those platforms to make sure that regardless of where people are reading it, that it looks good. I can have a whole video on ebook formatting, but it would just come short of just reading The Zen of Ebook Formatting by Guido Henkel, because he just goes through the entire thing. His book is amazing. That's why I recommend it so boldly. I learned everything I know from him. So, again, you send tests, you review them, you make changes based on them, and you create the finalized ebook file. I know that I'm going really brief through this, but it's mostly because you're going to have to decide whether you're going to hire someone else or you learn yourself. And if you decide to learn yourself, then Guido's going to teach you all of this. So, there you go. If you want to sell physical copies of your books, you have to find a vanity press or someone who can print copies of your book on demand. Now, I know that I'm not purposefully going through these really fast, but the matter is that I'm going through general ideas of what you should expect to go through. I would like to inspire you to do research, see which vanity press or print on demand being places where people purchase your book and the company prints a copy of your book on demand and mails it to them. Instead of, you requesting hundreds of copies of your books and, having to mail them yourself. Print on demand is very helpful, very useful. I like CreateSpace, mostly because when you go through CreateSpace, your book goes automatically as a physical book to Amazon. And that's just, it's just a lot of work saved. So I just like to use CreateSpace, but of course you can use whatever other print-on-demand, POD, or Vanity Press. Regardless of where you send it, you want to have your book printed, you have to look at their requirements, what they're asking of you, and you have to create a printable book format. Sometimes they take docx, PDF. You have to see their requirements. You have to look in there. You have to post questions if you have them. They have customer support for a reason. And you have to create a cover file. I can assure you, wherever you're going, they're going to have a nice long list and tutorials on how this actually works. Generally, once you submit all of these things, they let you have a print test. You can actually order as many as you want, but I think on CreateSpace, your first print test is free, I think. Don't quote me on it, I might be entirely incorrect. So you order the print test, you have it mailed to you, and you look through it. You look through it, making sure that everything looks good. It is entirely likely, assume it's going to happen, you're gonna make a mistake. There's gonna be something like, oh, whoops, this page break over here is just not right. As with previously, you check your print tests, you make fixes, and that right there is the publishing stage. You get yourself the ebook that is ready to go to an online storefront and the physical book that is ready for you to order copies of or put it up on Amazon/CreateSpace or other online storefront. I also want to remind you that if you happen to have an independent bookshop like I do around my local area, you can actually reach to them and see if they are willing to stock copies of your book. But that's another thing. Once you have the ebook, which people are going to buy, and the book, which people are also going to buy, it is time to move on to the final stage of the whole process. You have all of these things. It is time to move over to the final stage, stage 6, the release stage. And I know what you're thinking. But Max, I've been doing all this work. When do I advertise my book? I have always been of the belief that you take time with these things, you make sure that things work. I do not rush through a release window because that is foolish. Your book only gets to be released once. That's why I don't even think about sending it to Amazon. I don't think about submitting it to other online storefronts. I don't even think about my promotional material until I have it. It's here. And now we work on the release. This is the part of the process in which you are going to go on make accounts on all the various storefronts, whether you want to sell your book on Amazon, which is actually really simple, or other online or more independent storefronts like Gumroad or itch.io. You can actually do all of those things. You're going to have to learn their process, make accounts in those places, and go through their submission guidelines. Most of these places will allow you to schedule when your project will go public. Give yourself a window. Give yourself a nice time for you to be able to upload content, talk about your book, reach out to people, send review copies, do a release plan with some sort of marketing team, reach out to people, plan. You have gone through this entire process, and I know that right now a lot of you may be just exhausted just thinking about this. But what I want you to remember is that you have time. You can take your time. You have gone through this whole project. Why rush now? Take a deep breath. You have made it this far. Why just throw your book out there? Why quit now? Take a deep breath. Think. And take the next step. Reach out to people. Create content. Create videos. You can hire companies to make video trailers of your book. You can make it yourself. You can set up a blog. You can post about it. Reach out to your local bookstore. Do the thing where you let people know that you have made something. Have a nice little window of time. A couple weeks, a month, several months leading up to the release of your book. Stream yourself talking about it. Make videos about it. Make blog posts about it. Reach out to people you know. Reach out to the content creators who might be interested in checking out your book. Book reviewers, book bloggers, book vloggers. Reach out to people. Hire someone to reach out to people. Have a release schedule. Prepare everything. Schedule everything. And then live through that month of making posts, talking to people, reminding people that you made a book, and then it will be released. It will come out. It will be available for sale. People will be able to purchase it. There may be hiccups. There may be day one patches. You may have to make changes to the ebook file and the print file. I know I have. But a week after, once the book has come out, you can lean back on your chair, sleep in for once, and know that that story's over. Maybe not the story of those characters you wrote about, but that story of how you created that novel, of how you gave form to those words and told a story and refined it, turned that diamond in the rough into a true, perfect gem. And you walk through all the stages, revising it, reaching out to people, getting their feedback, creating the face of your novel, creating the versions that people would buy, testing it on various devices, creating a print file, reviewing everything, going through the release window. You might look at all that you have learned today and think, getting the book out's gonna take forever. But I can assure you, as someone who's been there, as someone who's lived through it, the morning after the book is finally out, you kind of just wake up and you realized that it all just happened like... Time goes by real fast when you're working on a book. And it's fun. And it's a lot of work. It is. But that's how it works, though. I'm not making this video to scare you, to make you feel as though you're never gonna release that book. But I'm showing you the steps. I'm showing you how it actually goes. The steps you have to take. And these are general. It didn't go in great detail about, actually the steps to creating a print file or the steps to making an ebook. Because those are stuffs that either A, you're going to reach out to someone to do for you, or you're going to learn to do them yourself. I learned to do them myself. It took a lot of learning, a lot of falling, and getting back up. But isn't that how life works? We run, we trip, we get up. We get up no matter what. And when the book is out, and you wake up the following day, you get up from the bed, and you get back to work. Hi there. I really hope that today's video was not super daunting. I don't want you to feel discouraged. I don't want you to feel as though you're never gonna release that book. But again, this here is not the reality check as though I want you to feel scared. But this here is the roadmap. It's the path you take towards release. And if you don't care about releasing your book in print, then you can skip over that step. You can just release your books digitally. That's fine. This is just my general guide, the way that I go through it. Stage 1, I write the book. Stage 2, I revise it. Stage 3, I think and I work on creating the cover, whether by myself or with an artist. Stage 4, I apply the feedback that I got from my betas and I create the final version of the novel. Stage 5, I create the files and actual book that people are going to buy. And stage 6, I release them. I hope that this primer on how to turn your story into a finished novel has been insightful. I'm looking forward to the people in the comments going, oh, that's not that scary. When you break it down into 6 steps, it actually feels doable. And if you didn't know what it takes to turn your story into a finished novel that you can hold in your hands, now you do. Now you actually know the process. And again, a summarized, cleaner version of my own checklist that I go through. 6 stages. Even a mountain can be overcome. No mountain can stand in your way as long as you break it down into parts, into steps, into stages that you can climb one at a time. I hope this video was insightful, and I hope that if anything I showed you another point of view. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Max, also known as M. Kieran. This is a bonus episode for my writing advice and inspiration podcast, Omakase, which was brought to you thanks to my patrons. Patreon.com/mkieran is the #1 place to support me and what I do. By pledging as little as $1 a month, you can earn cool perks like getting to vote on polls, enjoy access to my workshops a whole month before they go live on iTunes and YouTube, and of course you get early access to all of my podcasts up to a week in advance. It's a pretty cool deal for just $1. And of course, if you pledge just $1, you get a shout out at the end of all of my videos. You too can have your name butchered by yours truly. Elect the following people: A. Howard, Atalak, Alisa Dudley, Amanda Stevens, Amelia, Amy Palmer, Angela, Aniexo Hoshi, Biting the Sun, Blarg, Brenda, C.E. Richards, Caitlin Bumbalo, Cannibal Lily, Carriette Eccleston, Kathy Lindsay, Christiane, Christine Dennis, Kristen Lofton, Citro, Clem Pastor, Carissa Glasheen, Dwayne Jackson, Arasos, Joffrey, Heather Tasker, Irina Phoenix, John Netz, Janosch Hebatsky, Jaytona Kirkwood, Jeffrey James Williams, Joe, Juan Nunes, K.M. Anderson, Kameshwar Rao Shaluri, Kylie, Kiel, Kit Lee, Lier Killo, Lisa Effa, Loki, MT Locatelli, Mark Maruska, Mary Foster Smith, Nicola, Nicole Grissom, Noam Sohar, Novels and Tomes, Pablo, Pat Eichson, Polly Craftwell, Rain Misawa, Raquel Fernandez, Roa, Shimmer Tales, Sky D. White, Soul Muse, Sylvia Latilla, Synexia, Thomas Baker, and last but by no means least, Wendy Christopher. Hey guys, thank you for your support. I hope this video wasn't that scary. Maybe it isn't. I mean, I'm sure some people will find it daunting, because it's the realization of just how long the process is, and I think that's a human reaction. I don't want you to feel bad if you're feeling that way. But I'm also looking forward to the people who are going to look at this and go, okay, there's no mystery. It's not this fantastical creature releasing a novel. It's not this fantastical creature that I can't slay. You can. Think of it as a monster with 6 different heads. And once you have defeated all of them, you have overcome it. It's just as simple as taking it step by step. Not rushing, not trying to take shortcuts or look for quick fixes. Because remember, you've spent so long working on this project. You poured your soul into that first draft. Don't cut corners. Don't take the easy way out. Dedicate yourself to this story that found you, and which you have dedicated yourself to. Please. Okay? Now go out there and get back to work.